Captain Peter Cutsey. This is part one of a circling to land maneuver. We're in Chambery, France at LFLB. This is a copy of the JEPI chart airport reference. It's a single runway airport at 6627 feet of runway for runway 18 left, 36 right. The airport elevation is 779 feet above sea level and is situated in a mountainous area. Let's have a look at what our plan will be to fly the localizer runway 18 from Peru. We're established now in the holding pattern, as you can see, and we'll go dynamic on screen. And we are in the holding pattern 097 inbound, and we will execute this approach down to minimums for circling, which are found on a special chart. And this is the chart here. So we actually transition from the localizer Zulu to the VPT runway 36. And the minimum is 1880 for Class C aircraft. So that's what we'll be doing. For the sake of this exercise, I've set up cavalcade weather, calm winds, and QNH 1013 at the field. For your reference, transition altitude on leaving Chambery is 6,500, transition level as assigned. So, and the temperature at the field is standard at 13.5 degrees Celsius, and the QNH is 1013. The terrain, as I mentioned, is the big concern here. And we have designed the waypoints that we've inserted in an offsite database in the simulator for training. And later on, it can be, or would be inserted in the airplane. The 13.1, 8.9, 5.0, 2.5 DME of the Charlie Yankee DME is what we've actually designed here in Google Earth, overlying the actual approach. What we want to look at is the bottom of the map. You notice as I move the cursor, the red arrow follows our path from the top of the map. So we have the runway, or I should say the elevation profile below. And at this point here on the map, close to Delta 89 Charlie Yankee, is 3,013 feet. What we're looking at is the height of the terrain above sea level, So at that point on the approach, we will be higher, of course. We'll have a look at what we're going to be at. We will be at 6,500 at the 13.1 DME. Later on at the 8.9 on the non-precision approach, 5,000 feet. Then we are executing an RNAV overlying the localizer references. So we're going to use DME 5.0 at 3140 or above. And then, of course, the minimums, as we've discussed, are from a separate chart, as we mentioned before, of 1,880 feet, which is 1,101 feet above the threshold, above the airport elevation, that is to say. We're going to use a transition then from the localizer Zulu chart to the visual procedure chart. Going back to the Google plan, if you notice as we're making the approach, as we come up to 8.9 Charlie Yankee, the terrain takes a drastic dive to once we're over Lac Aubin, as you can see here. And then when we're in the procedure here, from point alpha, according to the VPT chart, the elevation rises again, and the highest at 1,200 and let's say 50 feet in the turn, 1,250 feet, the terrain beneath us, 1,250 feet above sea level, and we'll be at 1880. So we have good clearance between 1250 and 1880. The procedure overlies the actual procedure on the visual approach chart, so that at point delta, we're still at 1880. And the reason for that being is we're going to be intercepting the poppy, which is 4.0. So at that point, we should be 2 red and 2 white, and we'll disconnect all autoflight systems and land the airplane on runway 36. So the intent of these procedures are to eliminate accidents and incidents that have happened over the years. Since my 65 years of flying experience, we haven't made any changes. And in 1985, I introduced this kind of procedure to the world, but airlines have been very reluctant to engage in training and using the FMC, LNAV, VNAV, autopilot, and autothrottles in this manner. And that is a major mistake. We have had airspeed excursions in circling to land. We have had incidents in not following the prescribed tracks that are done visually, pilots doing their own thing, and CFIT, GPWS, incidents and accidents over the last 50 to 60 years. What you're seeing here is a procedure that will eliminate airspeed excursions, CFITs, and accidents, and also an advantage to noise abatement. And also will give airlines the flexibility of flying into airports they can't fly into under certain weather conditions due to winds and or combination ceilings. They have been restricted at single runway airports, especially all over the world. You've seen my PowerPoint. It's available in my Google Drive package. You've viewed that PowerPoint of what we can do. So now you understand what we're talking about. We're going to do this particular part in explaining the maneuver, and then in part 2, we're actually going to fly the maneuver. And you may be expected that you may get the odd terrain warning, but in visual conditions, if you notice here in the information for the charts, in the airport briefing charts, it's very important that you read the information given for this airport and the operating conditions and the weather requirements. This is a visual approach, is what we're actually doing, and the weather conditions of less than 3,500 and ceiling that is no night operations with weather conditions less than 3,500 feet ceiling and a viz of 5,000 meters. So basically done totally in a visual environment. If you do encounter terrain alerts with the VSD and you can visually see that you are clear of the mountains, you have a decision to make to continue. If you're in cloud, you immediately have to do the terrain escape maneuvers. So that's something that we may see. We'll certainly see the terrain, but we may hear or receive all alerts. But as long as we're happy with the fact that we are clear of all terrain and following your company SOPs, you may continue the approach. All right, so let's come out of that and let's go back to the first chart that we're going to use. And the first chart that we're going to use, of course, is the localizer Zulu. So remember, we're going to have 109.5 tuned for raw data reference. We're not going to be using it, but we want to check the raw data to make sure it is fine and indicating fine. All right. So let's put on our airplane symbol here. So here we are coming in the holding pattern at Peru. This is our aircraft tracking. You can see the terrain outside. So laterally, the points that we're looking at are the 13.1 DME of Charlie Yankee, 8.9, 5.0, 2.5. Then we go, at that point, we'll be at minimum, and weather is such that we will be visual, and we will actually revert or transition to this chart. The briefing should be done well in advance with this chart. This chart should not be the chart that you are actually viewing while you're doing the approach. You need to keep the localizer Zulu chart available so that you can check your progress with respect to the chart. And just as important is the missed approach, which is very different than most missed approaches that you'll execute. And let's have a look at that now. So at any time during the maneuver that you decide to go around, you will follow the missed approach procedure, of course, for the localizer approach, localizer Zulu to runway 18, turning towards the airport, always turning towards the airport. And the missed approach is climb straight ahead at Charlie Hotel Beacon, which is here off the end of the runway 36, the extended center line of runway 36. So you will actually go directly to Charlie Hotel Beacon, and then a left turn to a heading of 080 with 20 degrees of bank max and 160 knots max. The moment you get on a heading of 080, you reverse the turn to the right to a heading of 260 and actually rejoin the Charlie Hotel Beacon, and then continue to climb on 355. So there's the turn, left turn to 080, and with those restrictions in speed and bank, then immediate right turn back to the Charlie Hotel Beacon to follow the track on your nav display, and LNAV, of course, to the localizer back course. And that's why we will actually have the 175 inbound is the course for reference for raw data, but we'll leave that. So we'll fly the back course outbound using our map and climbing to 6,500, and at 7.0 DME, left turn onto 277 to Kenzo, Govna, then to Pyrov, and hold. Okay, so that's the plan. So important that we understand that. The other point of interest is, we'll go back to the airport chart. Let's have a look at the airport chart itself and look at the POPI that we're going to be working with. For runway 36, it's a POPI of 4.0. So what we've computed in Lat Long Inc. is, in the procedure, we'll be at 1,880 feet at point delta on the visual approach chart, which is 2.5 nautical miles from the threshold of the runway, 2.59 nautical miles at 1,880 above sea level on a standard day, will put you on the POPI, which is 4 degrees. So that's how we designed the delta waypoint that we put in. Now, the reason I say that is, for years and years, we have been doing circling to land using charts similar to what you see here, which is a guidance to pilots to position themselves to land. LNAV, VNAV, autopilot, autothrottles, our procedures will put you in the same spot every time. I hope you enjoyed this briefing. This is part 1. We'll terminate this video and come back in part 2 and actually fly the approach. Thanks for watching.